morning, Nova Scotia. My name's Hank Markgraf. I was asked to do a little bit of a Ambrosia pruning video for you this morning. So here we go. One of the things I want to start with is we always talk about what we should prune and what should come off and where it should go. But I think the first thing you have to think about is how many bins per acre do you want to have on your trees? What's the sustainable yield? Where do you want to be? And how much money do you want to make? Okay, so we're standing now in a ambrosia block that's a few years old. Its spacing is 10 feet wide by 2 feet in between the trees, and you can see it's just recently snowed. So one of the things that we want to think about is how many spurs per tree do we want at the end of the day? This block isn't fully mature yet, and I don't think I want to be growing 50 or 60 bins per acre on this block yet. So if we look at this tree, we can see that it has lots of good growth, but way too many spurs in it for this season. So we're gonna have to come through and remove some of this wood to get it down to a more manageable level. So one of the things you want to think about is exactly how many bins per acre you want to have. On a spacing like this, you could get up to 70 bins per acre and sustain that year on year without too much trouble. But as I said, these trees aren't fully mature yet, and I think more around 40 bins per acre is where we want to be. Counting the number of spurs that you need is a pretty simple thing to do. You need 1 spur for each apple, and then you just calculate out how many apples you need per acre. So looking at this tree again, there's a lot of spurs from the bottom all the way to the top, and the tree's getting a little too wide as well. So to figure out how many apples we're going to need per acre, you simply take the number of trees that you have per acre. This is a 10-foot by 2-foot spacing, so we have 2,180 trees per acre roughly. And we're going to take that, and we want size 100 apples. So there's 2,000 apples in a bin. So 2,000 apples per bin times 40 bins per acre equals 80,000 apples. 80,000 apples divided by 2,180 trees gives us approximately 35 to 37 buds per tree. Now again, when we look at this tree, there are way more than 37 buds per tree. So we're going to have to start removing some of these in order to get sustainable yields. Now it is early in the season. There's still lots of snow on the ground, and as you saw by some of those pictures, the buds are not quite fully developed yet. We're not sure which ones are going to keep. So one of the things I like to do is sometimes go a little bit higher than that. A rule of thumb that I go by is roughly to keep about 20 to 30% more buds than that. So at the end, when I count after I finish pruning, I should have somewhere around, say, 50 to 60 buds per acre on each tree, and then I'm fine. Okay, so now we're about ready to start pruning. As I said, we want to get this down to somewhere between 50 and 60 buds per tree. There's way too many on here. At 2 feet spacing, we can shorten up a lot of these branches and we can start thinning out, or else we're not going to have good colored fruit. So let's get started. Starting to remove some of these older branches here at the bottom right away, and starting to thin out some of this wood as we move up. Can definitely start cutting some of these back so that we've got nice tight spurs to the tree. And then we look at branches like this. There's really only 2 apples on it. We can start to remove those, shorten some of these up. Again, we can even shorten up some of these ones here as we work our way up the tree and start thinning out some of this fruit. So sometimes you'll see I do a bench cut, which is a cut like this, and I leave a little bit of a bench. What I'm hoping for is a new spur to grow underneath here. And sometimes you'll see I do what I call a 3 or a 4 finger cut. And this was done last year and to a little spur, and it left a little bit of a growth here. So it's sometimes when the branch is too big, I'll try and remove it, and sometimes I'll leave it. It kind of depends where it is in the tree and how much light I'm trying to get intercepted. Again, this was a more than 4 finger cut, but there was a nice spur to cut to there. And you can see what happened was it really didn't result in a lot of growth coming out of this. It didn't explode, which is one of the beauties about growing ambrosia. So looking at this tree, we can see 2 4 finger cuts that were made last season. This one Didn't have any spurs on it, was just a blind cut, hoping for the best. And we got a little bit of a spur coming out of that one. If we move down to this one down here, you can see this was a 4-finger cut on a pretty big branch. There was a short little piece of wood here, and you can see it didn't result in too much growth the following season. So I talked about doing a 4-finger cut, and here's a branch that I'm actually going to do it on. You can see there's a pretty weak spur right here, a little bit better spur right here. If I do 4 fingers like that, I can make it work. So I'm going to try and cut it back like that, see if that works. Another branch that is too big and is getting too out of control and way too far out into the row is this one here. I'm going to try a 4-finger cut on this one, just going blind. There's no buds there that I can see, but we're going to see if it's going to work. So as we work our way up the tree, we need to continue to do spur pruning, lighten the number of buds that are on this tree, and we're gonna have to deal with this top. This is the top wire. We won't wanna go too far above this wire. It'll get floppy, it'll get overgrown, and we'll get in trouble. So as we move up, we're gonna continue to do our spur pruning. We're actually gonna get quite tight into the tree at this point and remove a lot more spurs, just so we can keep a nice pyramid shape. Even though this tree is only 2 feet wide, it still has to stay as a pyramid shape. So when we get to the top, we're gonna try and figure out a place to cut it down to. I don't like going more than maybe about 1 foot or a little bit above that, above the wire, and then we have to terminate the growth. I have a nice spur up here. Let's give that a try. If that wasn't good, you could come down a little bit further and just remove some of that. And remember to give yourself a bit of a blow-off valve. So we're going to want this to grow. We don't care if it grows 2 or 3 feet in the air. There's no fruit on it. It's only going to be 1 sucker. It's not going to produce that much shade as we get into the growing season. And we can go back to another one of these that we've cut back to here the next season and just keep renewing those as we grow through the entire life of this tree. All too often we look at perfect blocks and perfect pruning situations, but I think you learn a lot from looking at situations that aren't always perfect. So beside me right here, we have 2 trees that are scion rooted. They were M9 when they were planted, but unfortunately, and below the snow, you can't see it, but the union has slipped below the ground and we have these overgrown trees. And here's some really good examples of overgrown trees. It's basically a seedling planted 10 feet by 2 feet. So here we have a tree that's not scion rooted, but does have quite a bit of extension growth on it. Some spurs that are getting a little bit older and a top that's getting out of control. So what I'd like to do now is actually show you how we would kind of do some corrective pruning on this tree and try and bring it back. So looking at this problem tree, we can't correct it all in one season, and you're going to leave branches that aren't quite ideal at certain times. So I'm just going to start pruning and talking about it as I work my way up. So some of these spurs are too far to the ground. Nobody likes picking on their knees. As we work our way up, you can see a 4-finger cut has been done here and here. One has been successful, one hasn't. So we're just going to try it again. We're going to actually leave this one, even though it's right below this one. But we're going to kind of prune this back a little bit, try and get some more light in here. And then we start working our way up to a bigger problem branch. A 4-finger cut was done a few years ago. It kind of exploded with growth. I'm just going to take this one off. I'm actually going to leave this one. I'm not going to cut it back. I'm not going to do anything with it. If we can slow this tree down, ambrosias will spur up, and there'll be something here that we can prune it to next year. Some more spur pruning, a little bit of cleaning up. Bit of a harsh cut there, but we'll try and do it. Another harsh cut that we're going to do here. Some more spur pruning. And then this one here, we're just gonna remove. All right, so we're continuing to move up the tree. You can see I'm standing on a ladder now. We're gonna try and remove some of this wood here that's causing shade and discoloration to our fruit down below. Some fruit was left on here because they were weak spurs and didn't get a lot of light. That problem is coming from here. So we're gonna be pretty harsh with removing these big tops, doing some cleanup work, more spur pruning, and now the top. You can see it was cut and it didn't get thinned down, so you got a bit of a crow's nest up top here. We're gonna single this down to one fruiting wood. So I'm gonna take this one off, that ugly top, and single it down like that. That's or how tall it gets. We just wanna have one blow-off valve, and that will take away the power and allow this to spur up for next season. And you'll even get some spurs up here next year, and you can prune it to that next season.